cooperators. Okay, and different technologies that I have worked on include service virtualization, web testing, web services testing and automation, and then UiPath RPA. And that's why I'm here today to share my learnings with you. I hope this turns out to be a useful session for you. Thank you. Let's get started. Let me share my screen. Is everybody able to see my screen?
Yes, Sona, we are good.
Okay. So topic for today is UiPath Studio Security and Governance, and agenda items that we will be covering for today includes, we'll be discussing a brief on RPA typical risk, and then what are the security guidelines and features that UiPath has provided, and then why governance is required, what guardrails UiPath governance can help us to enable, and then we'll finally be discussing how governance can be applied in UiPath. Okay. So before we jump on to RPA typical risk, let us just understand what is RPA in simpler terms. Like RPA is enabling robots to do tasks and activities that humans do in simpler terms, right? So that means RPA, when robots are performing the tasks humans do, so that will lead to having credentials that humans have, that will lead to having access to privileged informations that humans have, right? So if these gets combined with any faulty automations, this can lead to a security threat. So we are here to understand what are the different risks that can arise from typical RPA projects. So first one, as I said, like when we are mimicking human user action. So first one is robots would have access to credentials, right? Normally used by human users. Second is robot would also have access to privileged information, that's personal data or any financial data. Third one can be unauthorized modifications of workflows in development or testing environments, and then in production environments as well, right? So after these are various risks that can arise from any RPA project. So UiPath recommends a few security guidelines at each component level, like at the studio level, and then at the robot level, and then at the orchestrator level. So today we'll be going through different security features and guidelines that UiPath recommends. Okay, let's go through first guideline. UiPath recommends to do a proper code review of the automations. So how code review can help? Code review can help us to enable the processes that we are running are safe and stable. For example, secure password practices. So code review can uncover if we are not using passwords in a way we are supposed to use. We should be following secure password practices. Now then another example can be if we are making use of hard coded values. So it's like a natural thing. As a developer, we initially go ahead with defining some hard coded values to do some dry runs, and it's so easy to forget it later on to remove those hard coded values, right? So code review can help us identify those, and also if we are using the confidential data within a trusted scope, or we are making it global. Apart from this, code review can also help us identify or streamline variable naming conventions, argument naming conventions, and there are many more. We'll be discussing that as and when we progress through the session. And next guideline, let's go to next guideline first, isolating environments. So this one here in UiPath recommends to have proper isolation between environments. What we mean by this is proper isolation between development environment, testing environment, and production environment. So how can we have that isolation? So how can we secure an automation by isolating different environments, by ensuring developers cannot access robot settings, the one that we have on our robot settings page, wherein we go connect to orchestrator using machine keys or interactive sign-in options, right? So either we go ahead with blocking that one. Second one can be developers do not have access to connect to production orchestrators. Third one can be development studios should only be connected to development environments, but not to production environments. So by restricting these, I would say these things, we can ensure that we are securing an automation in different environments, and there is proper isolation in there. Third guideline that UiPath recommends is version control. So UiPath at orchestrator level, there is already a versioning control mechanism. Like whenever we publish any package to orchestrator, it's always by default, its version gets incremented, and then we publish with the latest version. So that versioning control is already there, and that is at a Nugget package level. However, UiPath also recommends to have this version control at a studio level. How can we do that? By integrating our studios with source code control systems such as Git, TFS, SVN. So when we do that at studio level, we can track the changes even at granular levels, like at XAML files levels. And version control also comes handy, right, when we are working on large projects and multiple people are working on same project. So instead of flipping those projects through emails, which can again lead to a case of data loss prevention policy. So if we go ahead with making our projects through repository, controlling their versions through repository, tracking their changes through repository, it really becomes handy working on a large project. And it's easier to track what a person has made, to merge conflicts, to check-ins, all the changes that we have been doing on that particular project. And the feature that UiPath already have at studio level is automation packages. So you would have seen whenever we try to publish a package to orchestrator, so there are two ways. One is a direct way and another one is indirect way. So direct way is when our studio is already connected to orchestrator. Either that can be either using machine key and our studio is connected to orchestrator, or that can be through interactive signing, another option. We can be connected to orchestrator. So when we are connected to orchestrator, so there is an option. When we go to publish, we can directly publish our packages to tenant level or folder level, right? So how this is secure is if if a person is not authorized to access orchestrator, you cannot publish any packages to orchestrator. So this is why direct way, but there is an indirect way also to publish packages to orchestrator, and that is via manual upload. Like you publish your packages, but you publish it on your local, and then you check that package manually, you log into orchestrator and you upload your packages there. So that's another option. But again, in this one also, no person who is unauthorized to use orchestrator can do this, right? Even only when you have proper access to log into orchestrator, you can upload your packages. So that is another way UiPath is securing our automation packages. So these are the security features and guidelines that UiPath recommends to secure an automation in UiPath Studio. Let's understand now how we can implement these guidelines. So first, talking about isolating environments. So this is something our platform administrators need to take care of, like by defining proper roles in orchestrator, by assigning proper licenses that developers or then UAT users should have. So this is something that platform administrators can control. And when it comes to version control and code review, so these can be controlled by UiPath Studio settings. look how we can do that. I'll just go out from here and then let's go to Studio. To do a code review, UiPath has offered us a very good feature, that is workflow analyzer. So when you go to project, you go to design tab, there is analyze file drop down. You click on this drop down and there is an option workflow analyzer settings. When we click on this one, all right, so there will be a different set of rules that UiPath provides to ensure we are building compliant and quality automations. So all these rules are categorized into different kinds. Like there are many rules related to security, and then there are many rules who helps us enable a good maintainability and readability of our automation workflows. And then there are rules with respect to usage of particular features, and then there are anatomy rules, and then there are few rules which are controlling design best practices in a project. So that would include like variable naming conventions, argument naming conventions. Let me also show you and give you a brief on those rules, so you'll have a better idea what I'm talking about here. All right, so here you see workflow analyzer. So workflow analyzer helps us ensure our project is meeting high quality standards, right? So if you will look here, so there are different security rules that workflow analyzer provides. So these 3 security rules you see, these are centered around ensuring secure password practices. So let's say in your project, if for passwords, you are defining those passwords, or let's say, so you have defined those passwords in assets as credentials, and you are fetching those credentials from Orchestrator at one place, but you are making use of those features maybe somewhere at the end of process stage, or maybe quite a later in your project. So this error is gonna flag. It's gonna flag and suggest you to have your credentials fetched only in the trusted scope, which means only in the scope you are going to use those passwords. You are recommended to fetch those credentials in a narrow scope, in a local scope. It should not be global. And then second rule is there, which suggests which is related to argument usage. So it recommends the passwords that we are using, they should not be made as an argument. So I remember there used to be a file get@credentials.xaml in UiPath framework in quite an older versions. So using which we can fetch a credential and then use those as arguments for another workflows. But of late, so this is not recommended. So UiPath recommends you to use get asset credential activity wherever you are going to use that password. So you should not be making those variables as arguments, and those variables should not be global. And then there is one more important security rule here, secure string misusage. Secure string misusage is around, example, let's say you again fetched credentials from Orchestrator, and then there is some activity and you are trying to pass your credentials in that activity. But before doing that, you are converting your secure strings to a string format. So this will flag an error. Like you are not supposed to convert your secure strings as plain text and passwords. So this is a misusage of secure strings. So we should be using secure strings wherever we are using passwords. So these 3 rules are around these security practices, which helps us uncover wherever we have used password in a wrong manner. And it's really important when we are especially dealing with financial data or complex or critical processes, which is giving us an access to confidential data, and then we are making use of the credentials. So it's really important that we are making use of credentials in a right way and secure way, so that we are not exposing ourselves to security vulnerabilities. And then there are, okay, so these are the few naming rules also. Variable, which talks about variable naming conventions, argument naming conventions, and argument default values. So these are basically around, it's like ensuring standardizations in your projects throughout, so that everybody is following right naming conventions, right argument conventions. So these rules help you identify if variable naming conventions are not as defined by organization policy. And then there are few design best practices rules. So high arguments count, multiple flow chart layers, and then it helps us identify if there are any undefined output properties, any empty workflows. You have defined a workflow, but then you have not made a use of that workflow. And then an empty cache block. This is also, again, a very important rule. So try catch, whenever we are using, so we use it. An exception is true, we catch it, we log it, or we take the action required, and then we proceed. But if we are having an empty cache block, so it's like we are catching the exception, we are just pressing it, like we are not making any logs there, we are not making any entry there, what was caught, what is an exception. So this is also another case which in a way can lead us to security threats. So there should not be an empty cache log. We should always be logging exceptions, even if there is a scenario we are we are not going to take any further action, but still we can at least log a message stating this exception was caught, right? So this helps us identify what different exceptions occur in the project. And then there are anatomy rules. So these you must already be aware, like project dot, how important project.json file is for a project. If it does not exist, a program doesn't know where to start. This defines the entry point of your project, right? So this is important. If it is not there, it's gonna flag this error. And then main workflow, there should always be a main entry point in your project, which is defined in project.json file. So if by chance, okay, so you'll see here, there is always a main.xaml, but there would be some cases where we do not want to use this main.xaml, and we want to make another file as main. So we right click on that file and we can do set as main. Oh, sorry. Set as main. So this defines that this file will going forward be an entry point for your workflow. And then there are few readability rules which helps to increase readability. It's related to if you're at how many levels you should be nesting your if statements. So it's like if inside if, and if this nesting it to deeper level, it reduces the readability of the program. So this using these rules, we can define to what level ifs can be nested, like to depth 3 or to 4 to 5. So accordingly we can we can customize these rules, right? So they for all these rules there are by default values, like whether this should be throwing a warning or error, but we can all change settings for those rules as per our requirement. And then the okay, so then important rules here related to usage. So these are the few of the rules in here are really important from governance point of view. Let's say there are few conditions from an organization point of view. There are few set of packages that have been identified by an organization, and organization would want to block those packages, and states these packages should not be used in any of the workflows in so and so organization. So that is something that can be done using this package restrictions rule. So we can define packages there which should be restricted. We can define particular versions of those packages which should be restricted. And then there is activity restrictions. Let's say there are particular activities that an organization wants should not be used. I'm just taking a random example. Let's say read PDF with OCR. We're saying this PDF with OCR activity should not be used from an organization point. So we can go to that activity, take that namespace and define that in the rule, so to block that activity. And then there is one more important rule here, required packages. What does this rule do? Required packages enables, like you all would have seen, whenever we create any new project in UiPath, by default, 4 dependencies are always there, like system.activities, excel.activities, mail.activities, and most importantly, UiPath.UI.automation.activities. So these packages are by default included in the project, right? So likewise, if an organization have developed a package in-house or any activity in-house, and they want that for every project that that an RPA developers create, they should be making use of this package that can be related to compliance, or that can be related to some another features, right? So if an organization wants, that should be included in that default list of packages, so that can be entered in this required packages option. Another example here can be, let's say you want to enforce particular version of the package should be used. What do I mean by that is, like, let's say let's take an example of UI automation package. So latest version is, I guess, 21.4, or let's say you want to use the latest, organization wants people to use at least 20.10.9 version of this package. But we realize our workflows are using still an older version, quite an older version of the package 20.4. So and therein and it is suggested to upgrade your packages, because latest packages will always have better features, will always have more stability, and more security aspects will be covered. So it's really recommended to upgrade your packages to a near to latest versions. We should keep upgrading the packages. So those kind of conditions and scenarios you can enforce using this required packages option. You say UI automation.activities should be greater than equals to 20.10.9. So which enforces, if your project is having a version less than that, workflow analyzer will flag an error for you stating that your organization restricts the usage of this package. Okay, so likewise, there are many more rules with respect to workflow analyzer. We will not go in more detail here. So let's go and check how does this settings window look like. So whenever you will go here, you will see a code also. So these are different rules that we just discussed: anatomy rules, design best practices, readability rules, security rules. So you'll be able to identify those rules with the unique code. ANA stands for anatomy rules, and then DBP stands for design best practices rules. MRD stands for maintainability and readability rules. And then NMG stands for naming convention rules. SEC stands for security rules. USG stands for usage rules, right? Likewise, there are different rules here. So any rule that you want to apply to your projects can be enabled or disabled from this checkbox. So if you choose to disable this rule, so this workflow, whenever you will run workflow analyzer, these rules will not be checked. These will be excluded from that check. And then apart from enabling, you can always choose to change your default actions from error to warning or warning to error, depending on the requirements. All right. So, and there is one more rule, app URL restrictions. So, let's say there are particular apps or URL that an organization wants to restrict, the organization wants to enforce. None of these apps or URLs should be used in any of the automations in our organization. So that is something that can be enforced using this particular rule, app URL restrictions, wherein we can provide a list of prohibited applications that should not be used, and same way prohibited URLs. So you can choose to either go ahead with prohibited list or with allowed list, like what are allowed. And then one more rule is here. Okay, let me just error, and then okay, then infinite loop also. So this is also a case which in a way can lead to a security issue of like availability issue. So when we are running, when there is an infinite loop and no break is there or no condition is there to come out of that loop, so our automation will enter into that infinite loop in a way, making that system, that automation unavailable for use, right? And it can lead to consumption of resources for a longer period of time, making processes, systems unavailable for use. So this is also a kind of security issue which is related to an availability of system. So like this is also important rule which we can enable, and maybe we can consider to set the default action as error to ensure it doesn't lead to such situations. Okay, so this is it for now for workflow analyzer. And now you to run this, you can just click on analyze project, and it will analyze your project. Workflow analyzer will start running. All right, so here if you will see, so whatever rules or errors or warnings that I have set for my project, those will get flagged if my workflow is not meeting those expectations. So these are all the warnings. One important thing to note here is, no matter whatever warnings you have or info related messages you have, there you can always go ahead with publishing and running your workflows if there are any warnings. However, it is recommended to clear off your warnings to have quality automations. But if you choose to not go ahead with clearing your warnings, system will not stop you. System will only stop you for errors. If there are any errors, and you have enforced this, that your automation should comply to all those rules under error category, if there happens to be an error, you will not be able to proceed. And how we can enforce this? So this way, it's up to user to go ahead with analyzing your project or not. You can choose to do so, right? But there is another way. You go to settings, you go to design, and then there is an option enforce analyzer before publish. So if you say yes, so whenever you try to publish your project, it's gonna run for it's gonna workflow analyzer is gonna run and check for all the errors. But again, this is in the hands of developer or user. You can choose to say no, and you can choose to not analyze your project before publish. Likewise, we have analyzer before run. And this is the option and enforce check-in before publish. So this is related to version control that we talked in guidelines section. So when this option is enabled and you have opened your project by cloning repository from here, so whenever you will make any changes to your project, here you will be shown like with the pencil symbol, like 4 check-ins are pending or 5 check-ins are pending. And if you have enforced that check-in before publish, whenever you will try to do a publish, system will again flag you an error stating you have unchecked changes. Please check in those changes. But again, these features are can be enabled or disabled from Studio. So how do we, how from an organization point of view, we exert a level of control over these functionality? Answer is governance. Governance can help us to have a control over these workflow analyzer settings, like whatever settings an organization have set, okay, so and so rules will fall under error category, and in no case we expect anybody to bypass this. We are expected to clear these errors before being able to publish our workflow, and that kind of enforcement, that kind of control we can exert using governance. Now let's have a look at what governance can enable for us. What guardrails governance can enable. So first one is what feeds user may install packages from. Okay, so this is again an important feature that governance can help us to enable. So this talks about, let me again go back to Studio and show you this talk about which section. When you go to backstage view, go to setting, you go to manage sources. So the sources that we have here: official, marketplace, orchestrator host, local, nugget packages. So these are different feeds of our packages. So we can control these settings using governance. You can choose to disable, let's say, marketplace for some reason. If our organization wants a so and so packages from marketplace, or any package from marketplace should not be used without approval from organization, and you want to go ahead with disabling this, so this is something can be done from governance. We will have a look at that, how we can do that. All right. And then another thing is what activities and packages may not be used. So this we just talked in usage rules, we can enforce which packages should be used and which activities should be used by using two different rules of workflow analyzer, that is package restrictions and activity restrictions. This one, package restrictions and then activity restrictions. So this can be controlled using workflow analyzer. And then again, there is what version of activities may be used. So this is again, if we want our team to use a specific version of an activity or to block a specific version of a package, that again can be used done using required packages. So we can enforce a particular version of package using this rule. And then what applications and websites user may or may not automate. This is again something we talked. This is this can be done using app URL restrictions. What applications or sites users are allowed to use in a project, in an organization. And then secure password practices. So this falls around three rules, majorly three rules that I discussed for security. These ones we discussed, right? Secure string usage, variable usage, misusage, if we are converting those from secure to normal strings. And then development standards. So this falls under the ensuring variable naming conventions, design best practices. So this is again something that can be enforced using governance. And then there is another feature that governance can help us to enable: send feedback functionality. If you go to your Studio, and then there is an option here, send feedback, which is enabled by default. If you click in here, you can be able to submit any idea or bug for a project. And this is an anonymous one. But still, if some organization choose to disable this functionality, this is something that can be disabled using governance. And then several design and location settings can be enforced using governance. What is this? Let's have a look at this. Design, location. So these settings, like you can choose to disable editing of these text boxes here, or you can choose to give default locations for these particular options here. These are all the things that governance can help to enable. Now let's have a look how we can enable governance. When we go to help, there is a section here for governance which says generate governance file. So whatever settings that we have now for our workflow analyzer, when you go ahead with clicking generate governance file and click on classic policy. Okay, so this option, I just want to state it here. So this option is possible that not everybody is able to see. So like this drop down only comes when you are connected to orchestrated through a specific way, like using interactive signing. But if you are connected to orchestrator using machine key method, so this option will generally be this the simple button that you click, generate governance file, and it will show you something like this, uipath.policies.config file. So this is the file which helps us to ensure governance on UiPath Studio. So this is a file-based governance model. And when you go ahead with, let's say I go in downloads, you go ahead with saving that file. All right. And then let's have a look at that file. How does it look? uipath.policies.config file. So this is how this file looks. Initially, this is some okay, metadata of that file, and then this is a name that will show up on at this place, company policy. Here that name will show up, whatever you choose to provide to this policy, test policy, or you can choose to provide any name here. And then there are three profiles in this particular config. One is development, and then second one is business. So business is for Studio X users. So if you want to enforce some policies, rules to Studio X users, you will be updating the section under business. So this is development section. Likewise, we have here business section. Oh, it didn't come. Okay, so this section here, profile. So under this, whatever settings you will enable, that will get applied to a Studio X user, and development corresponds to your Studio profile. So that is to control settings of your Studio profile. And then there is third profile here, which is Studio Pro profile. So using that Studio Pro profile, you can control settings for Studio Pro. So these three sections, this config file is divided into these three main sections: business, development, and Studio Pro. Now let's have a look at one section. What does it allow us to enable? So first one is this is feedback enabled true. So this is a parameter key value pair which helps us to enable, disable the feature that I showed you here, this part, send feedback. So if you choose to say false here, it will be disabled to that user. And if you choose to say stay true, and then this will be enabled for user. Then there is source control section, which controls your version control, like whether you want to enforce version control on your projects. Like every time a developer goes to publish a project, they should be checking in the changes before doing that, whether you want to enforce that or you want to leave it to your developers to take an action. So using this section, you can control this. Allow edit for false means whatever setting you have enabled using this governance file, user will not be able to make changes to that. So this will disable this setting, and value will be true. And if you choose to say allow edit as true, so this will set its value as true, but user would still have an option to toggle between true or false. Can disable this setting by going to the studio, the way I showed you before. And next one is workflow. So in this, we are controlling the design and location settings. This part, this section controls this part, these toggles, like this one. You want to allow this edit, you want to allow this edit or not. So these settings you can control using this section. is collapsed view, and this analyze and publish. You want to enforce workflow analyzer processing during publish or not, you will choose to say value as true. And if you want users will should not be able to edit this, you will choose to update this value as true. Likewise, same can be done for run if you want to enforce that on run. And then XAML files, if you just want to enforce analyzer on XAML files, but not on the test cases. Like if you're connected to Test Manager and you are on a Studio Pro profile, you'll be able to create test cases for your XAML files and have a run. But if this one is enabled as true, your analyzer will only analyze your XAML files, but not those test files. But if you choose to set this as true, both will be analyzed. Same way, then if there are any custom additional rules that you have defined, so you can define that path. So all these settings can be controlled from this workflow section. Next main part comes is core, wherein we can control the feeds. Whether you want to disable official feed, connect here corresponds to marketplace. So if you want to disable marketplace usage, you will say this is enabled false, but you will also change this option here. Allow enable disable fields. So if this is false, whatever settings you have done in here, like setting this should be enabled, this should not be enabled, then local should be enabled, nugget should be enabled. So these settings will remain and user will not be able to make changes to those settings. So if you say this as true, enable disable fields, so it will be like the way it is shown now. So you will be able to enable or disable. Otherwise, this will be grayed out. All right. And then there is last section, which is analyzer. So this is a section which control all the rules settings for workflow analyzer. If you choose to say here allow edit as false, right now you would have noticed when I go to workflow analyzer, I can enable disable these settings. I can change any default actions. I can change regex of variable naming conventions and so on, right? But if you say here allow edit is false, so settings that you have put for workflow analyzer will be preserved. Nobody would be able to make changes to that. Okay. So this is about governance file and what all you can control using governance file. Now let's have a look at what are the different ways to enable that governance. So there are 4 different ways you can enable governance: by using a local file, by using an external file. So local file, you are placing this in a local folder on a system and you are providing that path and you are applying policy from there. External file, you are placing in somewhere else and providing a path and then you making use of it. External file can be done using 2 ways. Whether you can do that using registry editor or you can use that using orchestrator asset. And then there is third way, by defining an orchestrator asset. I'll go in detail and show you how does this look and how this can be enabled. For a local file, what you need to do is this UiPath.policies.config file. You would go to this path, this path. How can you navigate to this path? By percentage app data. It will be taking us to roaming, then UiPath. So basically app data, roaming, UiPath. In this folder, you need to drop your UiPath.policies.config file, and then it will be picked for governance. I have already dropped the file there to save time. So let's just go ahead. Okay, before that, I need to show you governance also because it will not work this way. So this is a local way. And then there is another way, which is using registry editor. How would you use that? You go to start and press regedit, registry editor, open your registry editor. Yes. All right. From here, you need to go to computer and then H key current user, this option, and then to softwares and then to UiPath. So here already some key value pairs would have been defined. You would go there, right click, new key. you will define here a string value, and then key for that value will be governance source. And this is how it should be defined. If you choose to say governance source one or governance or source, if there is any else name here, policy file will not be picked. It has to be exact this governance source, and the value will be the path wherein you have placed your config file so that it can pick up from there. This is the second method. So this is like first method, that locally it's not a secure method to enforce policy, but this one, if you choose to go this way, this is a little secure method, and which using which we can enforce this policy to different systems by making this a part of installation script. But then there is a better way to do this via using orchestrator. Let's have a look at that. Okay. Oh, it has logged out. Give me a moment. Right. So how we can enforce a policy, and this is these two methods that we are going to discuss now are the preferred ways to enforce a governance policy. How we can do that? We go to tenant, we go to folders, we click on new folder, and we choose to create a folder uipath.settings.config, and this folder again should be in exact format and exact name. If there is anything else like underscore or one or anything added in here, policy will not be picked. So it has to be exact uipath.settings.config file. That's the first step. Once this folder is created, next step would be to go to that folder, to go to assets, click on add asset, and create an asset. Now here you can choose to create either of the two assets. Let me show you what those would be. So there are two assets that can be. Ignore this underscore sign in the beginning. I've just added to ensure policy doesn't get applied. So there are two ways: uipath.studio.governance policies. So this is the most preferred way that UiPath recommends to apply your governance policy using this method. Governance policy, what you do here is you go to create assets, you define the name of the asset as this, exactly this. Type should be text, and value should be, you go to your config file, do Control A, Control V, and just paste all the contents in value for that asset. This is one way. And then second way is you can choose to say uipath.studio.governance source. So this will not hold the contents of the file, but a location, but a path to the file where that is present. So you can provide the path and choose this. But the most preferred way is using governance policy. And the way it gets enforced is, it is always enforced in this order, reverse order, let's say. So this is the most preferred way using this asset. So if this particular field is defined in orchestrator under that folder, UiPath would always go to this, and policy will be applied from this one. No matter if you have defined your policy in all three sources or not, it will always be picked from this one. So this would be given a preference. If it is not there, second thing that UiPath will look for is this, another asset that we defined on orchestrator, governance source. If this is also not defined, preference would be given to what we defined using registry editor. And if that is also not there, then a preference would be given to local file. Now let me go here. I'll edit this name, and we'll show you that policy will get applied. Update my asset. Okay, and whenever you make any changes to your policy file, you will have to restart your studios to bring those changes into effect. So I am restarting my studio. And another point here to note is when you create this folder and define assets, you might want to consider creating a new role specifically for policy users, maybe policy user or governance user. Why I'm telling that is if like for modern folder, when you go here, so how do you apply policy to different users is you go to folder, you go to this folder, here is a users tab, you click, you assign a user, you providing their name and then providing a role and then assign. So whatever users you will assign to this folder, policy would automatically get applied to them. And the importance of role here is if you choose to provide, say, folder administrator role or any other role, issue can be that all the users to whom you have applied the policy, they would have an ability to go there, go to assets and be able to make any changes to assets, but you would not want that to happen, right? So for that one, consider making another role and only enabling view asset option for that role and nothing else. View assets. And when you once you do that, you go to folders, assign that role with the policy user to that particular person, they would be able to only view assets but not be able to make changes. This will be disabled. Okay, so now I'm going to here, going to help, you will see or policy version 1.0 is applied. And if you will hover it over there, you can see config sources, orchestrator, UiPath.studio.governance policy. So it is picking this file from here, and that is exactly the asset that we had enabled. So this is the first one, right? And it is picked and it is enabled. And now if you will go to settings, whatever settings I have defined in that file are enforced. You will not be able to make changes to this. And it will say you governed via company policy. Likewise, it is for this, whatever is options I have enabled here. And then let me quickly show you how workflow analyzer window will look once this governance is applied.
Sonali, a time check.
Yeah, Udit, I'll just need at the max 4 minutes. I'm about to
go.
done.
We are in control. Thank you.
Right, so quickly open this. So now if you will have a look at this screen. Wow, a system hang at the right time. Okay, so this is how it will look. And now if you will see, you will not be enable, disable any of the options here and make any changes. It's preserved and it will be applied to all the users. You will add in that folder on orchestrator. And it will also show you a message, full functionality may be restricted by company policy. And that's how you can apply governance. And this is the most preferred way to do that. If you remove this particular asset from there and create this one, just and then this one will be picked, preference will be given to this one. And if none of the assets are there, registry key value, so this file will be picked. And if this is also not there, you choose to delete this, then local file that is present in roaming folder, this one will be picked for applying governance. So these are the 4 ways you can apply governance. And with that, I'm done with this session. So, and we are open for Q&A.
Thank you, Sonali. And I suggest you just take a minute break or a 2-minute breathing break. Absolutely surprised, and no pause, no break, and we continue. I'm just stopping the recording, and now we are just opening a house for a Q&A.